And all right. Well, welcome, gentlemen. We are back in the building. Hello, fam. We are right here. We're here in Sunnyside, Dubai. And we have a special guest all the way from down under, Paul G. Conlon. Welcome to the show, sir. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you, Markose. It's my second time here, and it's a pleasure as always.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Paul, for doing this.
Yeah, but actually, this is the first time. This is your first time because George is here, so we're making it special. So
first time with the full crew on board. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just checking LinkedIn and see. All right. Okay, we are live. Yes. Okay, that's good. All right. So we are set. Just a fair warning to our fam out there. We are experiencing some audio difficulties and stuff, so please bear with us. But in the meantime, let's get this party started, fam. All right. So, George, what we got on the list, sir?
I'm not sure how do we want to do this. Do you want to run through what did actually take place in the cryptocurrency world for the last 2 weeks? And Paul can just join in and share his thoughts and opinion on it. Or do you want to start with Paul, talk about his experience and expertise in the digital space? I'm okay with either. How do you guys want to go ahead and start doing it?
Actually, we'll have Paul decide. So we'll put the pressure on him. Peer pressure. That's all.
Position of authority already.
I know, right?
Well, I think earlier, Markose, you were talking about moving into it, right? Wading into it. So start with the topics of conversation first, and then I'm happy to do a brief introduction so everyone kind of knows me a little bit better if that works, and then we can jump.
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, that'd be good. Yeah,
fantastic. Let's do it.
Yeah,
I'm down for it. All right,
All right. Well, I'm on the east coast of Australia here. I'm an engineer and a product manager, among other things. Spent some time as an officer in the Australian Army in a logistical role. And so I've worked with technology my entire career. And recently I've just finished writing a book, which I'm sure we'll get into, called Citizen One, The Case Against Digital Identity. In subtext, that is government-operated centralized digital identity systems, of course. And some very interesting technical and social components to my research there, which I think will be quite interesting and topical for our watchers. So what else can I say? Very, very pro-crypto, very pro-human. Excited to be part of the conversation.
Brilliant, Paul. Thanks so much for doing that. So what we'll do is, we'll start off with what did actually happen since the last 2 weeks, because last Thursday we kind of missed doing the weekly session on LinkedIn, and on Tuesday we had the crypto crash, that is the Kamala crash, as I like to call it, and we did release a standalone episode. We won't get into details of that because that could take another hour or so. And later on, we'll get somewhere in between. We'll try to fix in your expertise regarding the privacy space. And I think we'll also put the link of an episode that you did with another great podcaster. I believe she's from Australia as well. And she did give a really great definition of what government is. And I actually wrote it down and I just sent it to my niece as well. And see, look, this is a neat definition of government. So we'll definitely go and touch base on that. Now, do we want to start with what happened on the Bitcoin Nashville event and just run through that? Because like it or not, the whole intention of Bitcoin was separation of money and the state. But politics and politicians, they still have a very strong say so far as the trajectory and direction of Bitcoin is concerned. And who's better than making Bitcoin great again is President Donald Trump. And he was kind of like the headlining event of the Bitcoin Nashville session, isn't it? Did you guys manage to see that event, or did you guys manage to watch it via YouTube by any chance? Or
the clips only? Yeah, the clips only. I would have loved to watch the whole thing. I probably will at some stage. But yeah, look at. I only really needed to see the clips to get the vibe of where we are. I think with those of us who have kind of been in this space for a number of years have really noticed its evolution and its growth, and just staring at such a major platform with major players now just spoke to the maturity of the kind of industry that we're in, for want of a better term. So that's what really jumped out at me, the fact that it's infiltrating the kind of main sphere of conversation and politics in general, and kind of reminded me a little bit of the phrase, Bitcoin. You don't change Bitcoin; Bitcoin changes you.
True, very true.
Yeah.
Yeah. As for me, I just saw the highlights, so I guess I'm in the same boat as Paul. But I think specifically, I would love to hear more. Love to check out Edward Snowden, hear what he has to say. So that'll be quite interesting. But I guess I just shared earlier, like I mean, I know for from an optics point of view, it's great to see Bitcoin in the limelight, like in U.S. politics and stuff. But I personally felt that we sort of lost the plot where like I don't get to see guys like Roger Ver on stage, or Eric Voorhees, or Amir Taki, or
Andreas
maybe
Antonopoulos.
Andreas, him, Antop. I guess some people kind of call him, like, I know they have a hard time pronouncing his last Greek name. Maybe another one like say for example like Zuko from Zcash. Like, I mean, he's there in the mailing list. So interesting. It's quite interesting to see that drastic, comparison. So that I think that for me that I have noticed. But
yeah, I mean, before the event, there was quite a lot of rumors, and we talked about this, Markose, that it was kind of fake news that they were announcing that President Donald Trump will put Bitcoin as a reserve. That was not true, because I tend to follow US politics a lot, and if he was to do that, he would have told it well in advance. He has said something called as Bitcoin Strategic Reserve. So essentially what that means is the US government has 210,000 odd Bitcoins. In his administration, they are not going to sell it. Short and sweet, simple. I would really recommend you guys to go and listen to the entire speech, because for some odd reason I tried to listen to it 3 or 4 times, and he hit the nail spot on when it came to Bitcoin and US politics. He also talked about firing Gary Gensler. Now, as a president, he does have the authority to go ahead and do that. He's also going to be appointing a Bitcoin and crypto financial advisor. Now, along with President Donald Trump, there was Robert Kennedy Jr. as well, who I personally like. Now, in that session, he actually talked about, Bitcoin ETF is definitely not good, and people went completely silent. You should literally see the crowd's reaction. It was like, what happens if there is a fork? So he was talking a couple of, technical things regarding Bitcoin. So if you're a Bitcoin maximalist, you would definitely like, what Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said. He did touch base about making Bitcoin a reserve, which may not be a good idea, because as much as we like saying it, an autocratic leader can make Bitcoin compulsory as a use case in the country, isn't it? So a country like North Korea can say, hey, starting from tomorrow, you have to go and start using Bitcoin. There will be no opposition. So a lot of Bitcoin maximalists don't actually like the idea of forcing people to use Bitcoin. What are your thoughts regarding that? Is it easier for an autocratic leader to go and start implementing Bitcoin particularly, not necessarily other cryptocurrencies? What is your thoughts regarding that?
Yeah, look, that's an interesting one. My general initial comment is I don't like force in general, and I'm probably in a fairly friendly audience when I say that. I'd have to think about what the motivations would be for an autocratic leader to do something like that, because obviously leaders around the world have benefited so richly from the systems that are in place now, and the principles of sound money usually are advantageous for the people at large, and that tends to conflict with governments that use force as their modus operandi. So I'm not sure how likely that it is to happen, but should we intervene? Should we stop? Should we worry? I'm not sure about that, because the ethos of Bitcoin is freedom of choice and universality and the various principles that you've spoken of before. So I think we're probably talking about symptoms at this point when we talk about, whether authoritarian states do this or do that. The problem is the authoritarian state in the first place, and everything else is kind of the consequence of that.
Yep.
Yeah.
And regarding El Salvador, and this is something, similar to what they tried to do, making Bitcoin a legal tender. I mean, unfortunately, based on the numbers, it's been almost 4 years, and it was unfortunately not a good decision. So had, let's say, President Nayib Bukele, put those funds in something else, maybe in just artificial intelligence or even gold, financially they would have been in a much better place. Now you can make an argument that probably in a decade's time or 2 decades time it would have been a much better move. Now I'm definitely a massive fan of President Nayib Bukele as well. He's definitely a massive Bitcoin advocate as well. Now there is Cynthia Loomis, who's another senator. She talked about buying Bitcoin on a yearly basis. So that is kind of like a great idea, but it should not be forced upon. Now, regarding Michael Saylor, I would really recommend you guys to go ahead and listen to the entire speech. I did not like it. I absolutely did not like it. He sounded like, the BitConnect guy who's trying to sell you something. His background is in physics and electronics engineering. He actually said a statement that when you make a transaction on Bitcoin, it is kind of like a vibration that you send to the energy of Earth. And I was like, what nonsense is he talking? I mean, I genuinely did not
A bit
like it.
spiritual.
Yeah, it just did not like it. So
Man,
the only reason why he's as a speaker is only because he's buying a lot of Bitcoin, nothing else. And
yeah.
in my LinkedIn, Paul, I have tagged him so many times where he has provided fake news and misleading information regarding Bitcoin. Now, look, we can be an advocate of
Yeah.
Bitcoin, but we cannot provide misleading and fake news information. And he's done that quite a lot. But that is my honest opinion.
George, let me just chime in on this because because like I have attended one of these X Spaces with Xano. It's a privacy coin. This one where I remember like Roger he's one of the big supporters of this privacy coin called Xano. So because many times I think he has like tagged Michael Saylor earlier and stuff like. He used a lot of these flowery words like Bitcoin is this atomical supernova energy of human energy transcending into the dimensions of 14 layers of reality, and he used all these
Max Kaiser type, channeling Max Kaiser.
yeah, so I mean, he's going on like I don't know. He was sort of trying to go on God mode and all this kind of stuff. So like but then like there are many people like guys like Mike Kaiser and all these other sort of these BTC maximalists. They go like oh wow what a great saying but like but what does that mean? Like, what do you mean by that? Like, oh, hold on, wait a minute. So, like, and also what I totally disagree with Michael Saylor is, like, because he made some comment about Monero, and many people know I'm a big fan of Monero, and when it comes to privacy and stuff, like, oh, like, because one thing I agree, but also disagree at the same time with him because, like, he said, like, Monero is too good to be a privacy coin, like. Governments won't like it, which, hey, I'm a big fan of it, but I don't know. But when he says like, you gotta like, put it public and, like, pay your taxes and like, yada, yada, yada. Like it goes against the spirit of what Bitcoin came in because we all know like these taxes are not going to, like build the roads or anything like that. Like it goes to the Federal Reserve, a private bank, and I know I can go on the deep end and all this stuff, but this is where I feel like this is a part where I totally disagree with guys like Michael Saylor and many other people too. They just like blindly follow him and they don't question it too. So and this is where the comment of governments come in. Like even Nayib Bukele too. Like. Like I would prefer him to, make all cryptos as a legal tender, like let the free market decide, not just do it in a centralized way. But, I guess, but I would say like in the long run, as more people get into the Bitcoin space, there's more competition. I can see, El Salvador in the longer will succeed, so at least I'm glad like like the El Salvador is sort of pissing off the IMF and the WEF people, so I get so hey there's some win, so I'm happy to be objective about it, and you know what, let's proceed forward. So yeah, anyways, that's my take on Michael Saylor particularly. So yeah, apologies for the London.
The only other thing I wanted to, or two other things I wanted to add is because of President Donald Trump talking about Bitcoin, there was a Senate member in Hong Kong. They are trying to have
Mm.
Bitcoin as a strategic reserve as well, and this literally happened in just a matter of 48 hours. And he actually said, if the
Right.
U.S. presidential candidate is doing it, why not we go and start do it? There is a very high possibility that Hong Kong might actually do it much faster than U.S. as well.
Yeah, I
And
can see that.
going back to politics, there was only one Democratic congressman, that is Ro Khanna. He also talked about the benefits of Bitcoin, and he constantly kept saying that he's hoping that other Democratic leaders in US or the communist state of US, sorry, in US, they're going to start implementing Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in the US elections. But
Yeah, it
that is
feels like a bit
essentially
of an
what
arms race, doesn't it? Sorry to interrupt.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
It
And
is.
up and after that, we have had the Kamala crash. Now, I think for our listeners, rather than running through it once again, I think me and Marcos recorded an over a long hour episode. So it is better for you guys to go out and listen to that, isn't it? Rather than us just running through it. I think Marcos, the videos in your LinkedIn profile, isn't it?
Yes. Yes. In my video. Yeah. Yeah. That's correct. Yes, that is correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Kind of.
if listeners want to check it out, let's say the audio version, it is under the Blockchain DXB podcast episode as well. Now, before we get into Paul and try to ask more information regarding his privacy space, I just thought I'll quickly touch base on few areas. One is regarding Qatar. Now, Qatar has taken a complete U-turn regarding cryptocurrency. And they were absolutely no, they were trying to push it back and they did not want to get involved in cryptocurrency. But since last week, they are taking a complete U turn and they're actually proposing a digital asset framework. And they want to regulate investment tokens, which is backed by tangible assets. Now, what is really interesting to note is that by the fourth quarter of this year, it's going to be live. And guys, the amount of money Qatar has, you know, them getting into cryptocurrency and blockchain will be absolutely huge.
Mm.
Because I remember when I did my master's, the professor was from UK and he said there is no chance in hell that US will ever try to wage a war against Qatar. And I didn't understand why he said that. And if you look at the amount of funding these guys have, and we know what happened regarding the football World Cup as well, isn't it? So that is one topic.
Mm.
What is the other thing that we have on the list? Do we want to talk about the hacks and exploits now, or do we talk about Paul's experience in the privacy in space?
I was thinking, let's cover the hacks because
Okay.
I could see because I'm predicting that it will definitely lead to the
Yeah.
conversation that Paul has to
Yeah.
talk about. So, but I mean, like again, this is where because I want the audience to know all about these hacks, all these vulnerabilities, and the reasons for these kind of stuff in the first
Yep.
place. And I think that's where I think we want definitely have Paul cover that. I know he could eloquently explain this much better than us actually. So
Yeah. I
let's do
mean,
that.
yeah.
All right.
So one trend which I've been observing only for the past 6 weeks, a lot of exploits and hacks are back. Like every second day, I'm seeing some news regarding exploits and hack. The first and the biggest one was with Wazirex Exchange, which had a hack of $230 million in India.
Unbelievable.
Now, this is where the privacy guys experts should actually kick in. And Paul, you may want to check on this because there was a five signature key or multi signature wallet. Despite using probably the safest mechanism on this planet Earth, someone did actually exploit for $230 million. So looks like it could be an insider job. So it's next to impossible to steal someone's private key, isn't it? And these were five different private keys. So $230 million has been hacked. And that hack is also connected to another hack which did actually happen last night. That is to do with the
What?
Nexera hack. Yeah, and there apparently it was only for $1.5 million. But what the hacker with Nexera is kind of connected to the Wazirex exchange hack as well. And this goes back to privacy. We don't know who the hacker is, but we do know of a hacker whose privacy is known, and this is more of a white hack. So white hack is done, by people who try to find vulnerabilities, isn't it? But rather than finding vulnerabilities, he actually went ahead and stole the funds as well. So this is like a pretty gangster move. And this was, I believe, done by, let's see, Ronin Bridge. This was done in Ronin Bridge for $9 million. So it is extremely bizarre and strange. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, they know who the attacker is. So it's just a matter of, finding out who the right person is. Apart from
You
that,
know,
let's see, quite a lot of facts here. Terra
I
blockchain.
gotta.
Yeah.
All right. So I just want to bring up because I know we have covered this topic with Kraken and Certic, right? So
Hmm.
Certic was
Yeah.
their team was supposed to white hack this stuff, but they ended up like stealing stuff, and then like this whole fiasco came in. But I would support the Kraken guys because they're like, look, you just have to hack, like take $5 or something, and report to us and stuff, like. It's one of those strange issues. But anyways, like it's kind of um, in this is maybe like the second time hearing this. Suppose a white hack attack now move to the dark side, move to the Sith. No more Jedi's. I mean, what's going on? There's an imbalance in the hacker world. What's going on, man? Are they not getting paid enough? There's no economic incentive for these guys to be the white hackers. Like, what's going on? Paul or
Yeah.
George, what's going on, guys?
I mean, and this is where I was thinking, let's say if such hacks do actually happen in a centralized world, we
Yeah.
can go and sue the entities, isn't it? So what is your guys' thoughts regarding a hack, let's say, in a distributed or decentralized world, in comparison to, let's say, a centralized world? What is your opinion regarding that?
Yeah, that's a really important distinction, actually. I think there's a couple of overlapping concepts here. Right? So hacks are inevitable, and you can put them down, I guess, broadly. Is it a problem with the technology, or is it some component that's native to human behavior? For example, you've kept your crypto on a centralized exchange and not your keys, not your wallet, this sort of thing. There are plenty of ways that, although the multi-sig case is interesting because that's specifically designed to mitigate these types of problems. But there's a lot of human behavior that contributes to this. But one of the concepts in finance in general is diversification. And again, if you go into anything like this, any sort of sphere like this, where there's some sort of value that people are incentivized to acquire for nefarious reasons or otherwise, then if you go into it with the idea that human behavior is always going to guarantee that people are going to try and do these sorts of things, and you just put the
Yep.
mitigations in place ahead of time and diversify, and these are kind of common concepts that have been battle tested in the field of human behavior in the past. And I also make the case too that we haven't really raised all the failings of the legacy systems as well. I mean, hacks could have been defined back in the day as the masked bank robber who walked in and handed the note to the teller. That's a hack of sorts. So our whole history is replete with this sort of stuff, and obviously the space that we're in is not immune to it. So I think there are just some commonplace things we can put in place to mitigate those, and then understand that we're in this for a reason. The technology that we're using now and the systems we're using now have many benefits and come with the drawbacks of the past as well.
Absolutely. And on that line, I just remembered what Wazirex Exchange has done is that the current funds that they have in the exchange, they have given the option to the customers that they can block either 55% of the existing funds and utilize the remaining 45% of the funds. So it's absolutely terrible, I think. They've got, and that looks like the best outcome, at least in their case. And there were two more hacks as well. The breaches, rather. One was a breach that is a Casper network security breach. And this is what questions, I'd like to question about the whole nature of decentralization, because there is a centralized team that went ahead and decided to go ahead and halt all the transaction. They halted all the transfers, minting, and staking. Now, usually in a distributed or decentralized world, the decision making is extremely slow. It's a community who gets to decide, no, let's go ahead and stop producing block. But in case of Casper Network, looks like it is the foundation or an association has gone ahead and done that. I'm pretty much sure once SEC finds out, they will definitely not be liking that, because this clearly means that there is a centralized entity going ahead and making the decision, isn't it? That is my honest thought. And now, apart from that, there was also Terra blockchain that had a hack for $4 million. The only thing I can say is that in comparison to, let's say, hacks and exploits that used to happen in 2021, which there was quite a lot, this time the volume is almost 10%, less than 10% of the numbers back then. Did you guys? I think it was Ronin Bridge, right, which had a massive attack, and what the attacker was doing, he was trying to communicate with the explorer. I'm not sure if it was the Ronin Bridge attack. So what happened is
Could
that
be.
the hacker stole all the funds, but he did not know how to utilize it. So he was sending funds to people, and he was writing a message. What should I do next? And people were actually responding. You can transfer. Yeah, it is absolutely crazy. It's kind
Wow.
of like
Okay.
a funny version of Money Heist, to be honest. So I'm pretty much sure Netflix is going to make a documentary on that as well. So he was actually
They
asking, what
better.
should I do next? So he was giving someone $10 worth of cryptocurrency. What should I do next? And people were
$10.
responding it to him via Twitter. Yeah. And some guy from India, he actually said, "My mother is not keeping well. Can you please donate funds?" And that guy did actually give $50,000. And then there was a floods of messages. My mom is not keeping well. My dad is not keeping well. So
That's a
those
social
were
engineering attack.
yeah, cryptocurrency world is absolutely wicked and wild, isn't it? So that's about all regarding hacks and attack. Now let's talk about our guest, that is Paul. So why don't you take
Yeah.
the center stage, Paul, and tell us everything about what you're doing in the
Ah,
privacy space?
Yeah, thank you, George. Wow, what a topic to jump into. So yeah, I kind of came to where I am now by looking at I guess trends over the last few years that jumped out at me and sort of rung alarm bells. And we're a very technical audience here, and being an engineer, I maybe appreciate more than most the interaction with technology and our human lived experience. And it seems to me that in recent times, in recent years, we as a species are navigating some fairly uncharted waters. So there are a few kind of burgeoning areas at the moment, digital identity certainly being one of them that I don't think is really on the fore of many people's minds. And AI is another big one. I think that's very much in the fore of people's minds. And we might get into the AI thing a little bit later. But yeah, so I decided to take on the topic of digital identity, particularly centralized digital identity, going to your point earlier there, George, because I can see around the world governments are adopting and forcing the use of these systems on their citizens, and I think that's a very dangerous path to go down. And there are many examples in history where the use of identity has been weaponized against people. It's a very valuable type of data, and in my book, I break down the case from first principles as to why I claim that to be the case. Now, when we combine the valuable nature of human identity or data associated with human identity with the digital technology and the digital systems, the high-speed, permanent, redundant digital systems that we have now, it opens up a new dimension of risk to the everyday person that I think many people are blind to. So yeah, I've spent the last almost 3 years researching a book using my family history in 1930s Germany as a historical foundation to explore the nature of human identity, the value of that data, and how in my opinion, we are playing around with digital versions of our identifying information in a way that doesn't respect their true value and the risks associated with them. So hopefully that's a little bit of a background to lead into the combo.
Yeah, I think that is absolutely fantastic. What I wanted to ask is, Paul, based on the experience, can you tell us in terms of, break it down in terms of three areas? So for an individual, why is privacy so important? So let's say for my niece, for me, myself. Secondly, for a business, why is it important to have privacy? And third, I think we'll all agree from a state point of view, why is it important for them to give, self-sovereign identity back to individual citizens? I mean, what is your experience in all, or your say
Yeah.
regarding those areas?
So they're great questions. Yeah. Again, this is an area that I think people don't devote sufficient thought to. So the importance of identity to an individual, I think, relates to the freedom for anyone to do anything that they want. And by that, I mean, if you have a preference, if you like getting up at a certain time in the morning, you like living in a certain country, you like everyone has preferences, we eat certain meals. The freedom to make these choices is imperative to the quality of our life. And when we leak identifying information, even unsuspecting details. They can be the one of the unique aspects to identifying data is the fact that they have a direct relation on our lived experience. So knowledge of identity is the ability to define what that identity is and what it's permitted to do. So if you like anything in life, if you like being alive, you like living in certain countries, you like doing work, working in a particular field, then you by default value the custody of your identifying information, because you have no idea about how an individual, a business, a corporation, or a state can use that against you. And it usually has to do with the gating of resources, using identity to gate resources and compel people to do things that they wouldn't otherwise want to do. So I think identity is quite unique in that case. And I think from the business side, I think things are a little bit different, because there's an element of skin in the game about this. So a business may be motivated to protect the identifying information of its customers, usually to be compliant with the regulations that are imposed upon them. But at the end of the day, you know, if there's a hack at a business level, akin to what we've been talking here before about hacks, there's not really much skin in the game there. They might be subjected to a fine or something, but the personal experience is not there, I feel. Identity is very much an individual thing, and it relates to having skin in the game, because your life has changed when other people make assessments about your identity. And I have a simple example, actually, that came up just recently in my life. My wife's hairdresser comes from a different state in Australia. And in the last few years, we had border closures in this country, as many countries did. And around that time, she'd moved up into the state that I live in, and her car still had the license plates from the other state. Now, that's a piece of identifying information. And it turned out that some people saw that she'd come from another state and took offense to that, because the borders were supposed to be shut, and threw glass bottles at her in the car, and she had her children in the car. And that behavior was the direct result of some random person assessing an identifying piece of information and imposing their prejudices, their opinions, their lived experience on that person. The car could have been rented, as far as as far as they knew. But that's just one of those, just an obscure case where something that identifies you can attach to someone else's prejudices, consciously or otherwise, and they can directly influence your life. So I haven't found any other type of data that has that coupling in that regard. And just to move on to your third point there about the state, I'm sure this will be a fairly brief one. I think this speaks to the asymmetry of power. So human beings have proven time and time again that they do not handle power over time. And the nature of the state and the individual is a story of power asymmetry. And when you start using centralized identity systems, regardless of why they're justified, convenience, safety, these are some key ones, you only make that power differential worse. And wherever you have power differentials, you have all sorts of problems baked into the cake, usually social ones at the end of the day. And this is just a curiosity of nature, even if it's unintentional. You know, you have a parents and a small child, and they might accidentally move, and because they're so much bigger than the child, they'll knock them over and injure them. That's just the nature of the difference in size and power and capability. And to be completely frank, I think the state has no business at all centralizing our identifying information more than they already do. So
that is absolutely brilliant and beautifully said. Now, regarding the state, the only thing I can say is that in UAE, we have something called as Emirates ID. I'm not sure, Paulo, if you've been to Dubai or UAE. Have you been to Dubai yet?
I haven't had the pleasure yet, no.
Hopefully sometime soon. So we have something called as Emirates ID, and the government has made it clear that you're not supposed to give your Emirates ID to someone else. Your Emirates ID and your passport belongs to you. So no one can go and ask you for that piece of information, which in other countries, let's say I'm from India, I mean, that the government definitely asks you for that information. They have the authority to go out and keep it as well. So absolutely brilliantly said. And why don't you tell us about your book, Paulo? Because, I was listening to a couple of your episodes, and I think you cover quite a lot of areas in that book, particularly so far as privacy is concerned. You've given a couple of great examples in the book as well. So that'd be great for our listeners to know.
Yeah, sure. So my purpose with the book is to wake people up a little bit so that they make informed decisions. And through the course of researching the book, again, just to reiterate, I strongly make the case against government-operated centralized digital identity systems, and further make the case that if you want to digitally identify yourself, there are plenty of privacy-preserving capabilities now available in a decentralized fashion to do that. So to me, that argues even more for against needing centralized kind of archaic systems. Yeah, but just to back up a little bit, I wanted to bring people's awareness to what I was talking about earlier, how important their identity data is and how they should value it more. Now, I didn't want to write a textbook. It's very much a human story. I tell the story of my grandmother in particular, who was a teenage girl in 1930s Germany, where identity was weaponized very effectively by the state. In fact, much of how identity is handled in our modern systems comes from innovations from that time and place, surprisingly. So I saw that it's a very complex, almost philosophical discussion or topic, human identity, and I make some cases in the book about how we really don't understand who we are, yet we've built all of our social and economic structures on, one limited understanding of what human identity is. And I ended up breaking it down into a few pillars. I devote a chapter to identity. Then I look at trust, because I make the argument that we're addicted to identification. We use identification or aggregations of identifying traits, square peg, round hole type things, as a proxy for some sort of centralized assessment of trust, sufficient to exchange goods or services or information, typically online. But and I use the Byzantine generals problem as an example of how that doesn't actually solve the problem of how we create trust in our societies, particularly at scale globally. It just shifts the problem to another area because centralized systems are quite susceptible to all the problems that centralized systems are susceptible to. So I effectively, I see us rushing in and adopting these systems without the appropriate care, caution, and concern that I think that they are due. And in my research, I found once governments get a foothold on the beachhead of our identities, those systems tend to become entrenched multi-generationally, and it's a devil of a job to get out of them then. So let's make informed decisions about our relationship between the individual and the state, because that has consequences that are ill understood by many.
Absolutely beautifully said. And Paul, before we knew that you were going to come online, I tried to use ChatGPT-4 to check how you would identify, how would you define, let's say, identity. And I listened to your episode where you actually said the best way to use the definition of identity is the way we express ourselves in the digital world, isn't it? So I think that is a beautiful statement made by you also.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
And what is your thoughts about OpenAI? I mean, we have ChatGPT. They have something called as WorldCoin, Paul. I'm not sure if you had a look at that. And in that WorldCoin, it is associated with a physical device called as orbs, which is kind of something similar to a Black Mirror episode. Now, based on my experience, and let me know if you guys agree to it or disagree to it, what the documentation states is that, let's say, if I look at the physical device and if I do my digital footprint on that, I am in full control of the data. They use something called a zero knowledge proof. But a lot of people are actually detractors of the physical device called as orbs. And they recently had a remake and they tried to replicate the Apple style of the device. What is your thoughts regarding that physical device? So essentially it takes, a scan of your face and quite a lot of other features.
Yeah, in one word, skepticism. So I think with all of this stuff, prevention is better than cure. And wherever we have scenarios that even smell of offering safety or protection through means that can be co-opted or dissolved, and by that I mean legislative instruments or these often meaningless privacy policies, they're all well and good, but they don't actually prohibit anything from happening. I think the best approach going forward is to implement hard safety protocols whereby the way that you can best convince someone that something is private or safe is by using systems that are physically incapable of, doing what they otherwise claim they can't do. I categorize digital identification systems in my book as safety critical systems, and that I use the aviation industry actually as an analogy to that, because people can identify quite closely with how aviation works and how every role, every process, and every piece of hardware and software is subject to strict protocols that put hard fail-safes in place. And yeah, I just don't see that type of thing. And again, I say it's skepticism. I haven't looked in detail into the orbs, but particularly when talking about biometrics. So this is one of my pet subtopics, I suppose we could call it, because unlike passwords, unlike phone numbers, unlike all of these other kind of identity pigeonholes that can be fairly easily changed, your biometrics travel with you on your life's journey, and they can turn what was a mild moment of convenience unlocking your phone or whatever you've applied the biometrics to an absolute digital ghost that hunts you until your final days. And I think people should be very selective about that and incur the 2-second inconvenience to unlock your devices in some other way. I know, Markose, we've talked about this before.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the only thing that runs through the back of my mind, I'm not sure if you guys on Netflix have watched this documentary about Serpent. It is about, the notorious serial killer who used to kill people just to steal people's identity.
The first time hearing it.
Recollect.
Wow.
Charles Sobrach.
This is first time hearing it. This is okay.
He was a French guy. Okay. So what he used to literally do is, he used to steal people's identity only to steal the passport. But, I'm pretty much sure there are notorious ways how people can think of other ways. Now, what is your thoughts about, let's say, having the source code, let's say, be it of orbs or any privacy preserving protocols, the data or the source code to be completely open for absolutely anyone to go out and check it? This might be a little bit of a technical concept. So let's say if orb says that, you are 100% in control of your data, anyone can go out and validate and check if the codes in building that software does actually says what it is doing. What are your thoughts regarding that? Because I do have a question where I do feel that could be dangerous as well. But let's start with your thoughts regarding that here.
Do you want me to field that as well, Markose, or I can quite happily jump in?
No, go on. No, please go ahead. Go ahead. I think people should need to hear more from you, man.
Okay.
Yeah.
So don't trust, verify. This is the mantra
exactly,
we're all familiar with, right? And I think open source speaks to that mantra very well. So there's no higher degree of confidence that I can have in a system than me going in there and exploring exactly and understanding to the extent that I require it to be understood for my confidence level to come up. Because confidence is an intangible thing. My level of confidence will be different to someone else's. And so by providing open source, you empower individuals to satisfy their confidence in whatever claims are being made. And I guess it also speaks to a degree of honesty with the relationship as well. If you make a claim as a business or an individual, but you're not willing to empower the person you're making the claim to actually verify that, then are you being disingenuous? That seems to be a bit unnatural to me. So very much a fan, particularly in the AI space as well, because I've heard this kind of open source, open AI discussion playing out there as well. And I think we talked about this, Markose, last time. Mo Gadat's book, I've actually got it here, Scary Smart. He talks about AI.
Right.
He's the former chief business officer of Google X, and he made an excellent point in the opening of that book that represents a paradigm shift that I think many people aren't yet acquainted with, and that is these days the code that we write no longer determines what our computers do; it's the data we feed them. And so I think that's something that we really need to get across. And again,
powerful.
Going back to the confidence, having things as open as possible, maybe even access to training data. I don't know what that would look like. This is all fairly new. Would just ease our species into this new chapter where multiple kind of areas are converging. And at the moment, it just seems to be uncharted waters. So we need to charter them a bit better, and we need to do that preemptively rather than just throw something against the wall and hope it doesn't turn into a well-meaning but authoritarian AI system or something.
Yep, fair point. Yeah.
I mean, the only thing I'm thinking is what better person to talk about privacy than Satoshi Nakamoto? Because no one knows who the identity is, isn't it? And he definitely knew the power of being completely private. But what about some of the dangers, let's say, of privacy? Do you think there are a couple of dangers of being completely private? I'm not sure if you know about the news that actually happened in UK just for the last few days. The government was not giving out the name of the person who actually did the attack. Now, you could make you could be cheeky and say that the government is trying to keep the information completely private. They don't want everyone to know. Somehow, some way, the information got leaked. That led to a lot of riots right now. What is your thoughts regarding some of the dangers of, let's say, privacy as well?
So usually conversations like that um, revolve around this concept of safety. So
Yeah,
take the classic case where people are concerned about not taking their smartphones out with them because what if something happened? I won't be able to call. So that's a kind of sub example of perhaps you could argue a danger of privacy. First of all, show me anyone who hasn't got a cell phone now within calling distance, so it's not really an issue anyway. But that's a false dichotomy, I believe, because we it's an issue of self sovereignty. It's an issue of taking control and taking responsibility for your own life and implementing things in your life that suit your risk profile. So if I go out hiking on some dangerous mountain and I don't have my cell phone with me, to use the previous example, then I might want to take someone with me, or might want to tell someone where I'm going. There are mitigations I can put in
yeah,
place that I'm responsible for putting in place ahead of time to make me comfortable to the extent that suits my risk profile with taking that dangerous hike. It's not the job of the state to geolocate me just in case I fall off the side to send a rescue helicopter, because then you get into the murky gray area where you've got someone else now making the decision of what constitutes safety, and someone else defining the boundaries or the bookends of where your privacy needs to end. And that's just a slippery slope. I think it really is a binary question. We are all responsible for ourselves, our lives, the trajectory of that
Right.
life. And if we want to abdicate that to someone else, I think that's quite lazy. I think that's not really taking responsibility of your life. Then you're kind of dragging everyone else down with you, because you're
yeah.
accepting these centralized systems that monitor you in ways that you are likely unaware of, and they tend to just hoover everyone and everything up. So that's my take on that.
Absolutely spot on. Now, you mentioned about state bomb. The only thing I can say is, in the US election, there was a Republican candidate called as Nikki Haley. And during the debate, she actually said that she wants to have the social media accounts to be backed by a personal verification, which means, let's say, if I have a Twitter ID, before my Twitter ID is approved, I need to go ahead and give Twitter, for instance, my government issued certificate, my birth the certificate, all my documentation, and the centralized entity will have my records on file. And my Twitter ID could be something funny. Let's say like "Let's go Brandon" or "Kamala Crash," so on and so forth. What is your thoughts regarding? I think it's the worst thing to do for a state. What is your thoughts? I mean, regarding governments doing such
I'm
actions?
Yeah. Look, I mean, why? Like, one thing
Yeah,
that we should be asking with all of these things is why? Who's asking for this?
exactly.
I quote a study, some research in my book, because one of the cases that are made for this constant scope creep of identification, as you just described there, is uh, that for our safety, for these sorts of things that the people want. That's the caveat usually. And I cited a survey that showed the top 25 or 30 uh, issues as surveyed by voters. And unsurprisingly, you've got immigration, you've got cost of living pressures, inflation,
Yeah,
housing pressures. These are fairly global issues at the moment. And you hear people anecdotally talking about this stuff when you go to fill your car up at the petrol station.
exactly. Yeah.
You hear conversations like that. Not once have I heard anyone say, as the major impediment in their life, you know what? I think we should all be identified more. I haven't heard that
Exactly.
once. So
Yeah.
who's asking for this? I again, I just think what we're seeing here is an interesting runaway system. because if you look at the history of state involvement in identification, it's been it's a one-way direction. We have passports, then we have KYC, and then you need more KYC. It always grows and creeps. So if doing that actually results in a safer, fairer, whatever the metric is we're targeting in our society environment, then surely we should have seen a reduction in all of these things. We should see a reduction in hacks. We should see a reduction in whatever the metrics are we're tracking. But I seem to observe the opposite. Everything's getting worse and worse. So surely doing more of what isn't working or more of what's producing the opposite effects isn't the solution to our problems here. I think it's time, and I argue this in the book, it's time to take a step back and really question from first principles our addiction to identification, and maybe have some open and honest conversations about, now in the digital age, are there better ways, more sensible ways to structure our society that actually does foster trust and relationships and cohesion? Because I think doing more of the same is just going to produce more of the undesirable outcomes that are just everywhere in the world now.
Yeah. What about your thoughts, Markose, regarding privacy? Because Markose is a massive advocate of privacy as well, isn't it?
True, absolutely. I'm in agreement with Paul. I think for me, if we were in a bus, for example, we all are gonna stop at different bus stops. I think for me, when it comes to privacy, and then to me, the governments is not their damn business. I guess I'm just sharing from my history that, a lot of times, a lot of these government entities, centralized entities, whichever country, corporations, they have screwed up with our data. There's all these breaches. Times, some people have used our identity and try to hack into stuff, which kind of creates these unintended consequences and stuff. So, but also from I guess from a political level too, I especially, I have read just a little bit of part of the book which Paul has written, and I was just kind of like blown away from the start. Especially when he shared, especially I'm like kind of history buff, and I was quite amazed, and also blown away by how the Nazi regime has used identity to track and trace and use some of that information for their own business, for the other corporations, their business purposes. So some of these companies too are still in existence. So, and some of these businesses are also invested by the likes of BlackRock and Vanguard and maybe a little bit of State Street as well. So, anyways, I won't go that tangent. But then again, like, I'm just like, that's why I believe in the spirit of Bitcoin, the cypherpunk movement, the lunar punks, the solar punks. I respect some of the libertarian ideals and how we could use these ideals and with technologies like blockchain and crypto and also AI as well too, how we could use these technologies to empower the individual, so and I think that's and I do hope that the rest of humanity will could go through this great awakening, and not be part of the great taking where like I just disagree with governments, buying into Bitcoin and stuff. I'm like, I know, I know, just for example, I know like on LinkedIn and stuff, a lot of people talked about, like paper hands, German government, or diamond hands, Michael Saylor. I'm like, what? Like, first of all, I tell people, look, as a practicing Christian and a Jewish person, you know what? I think it's haram for governments to have Bitcoin. I think, they should sell to the individuals. So I wanted more decentralized, not from a Bitcoin sense, but also from a power structure sense, because they just keep repeating the same mistakes time and time again. So what I believe is that we need conscious individual solutions that can solve the unconscious collectivist problems that we are seeing in our current marketplace. So because if we use the same centralized entity to solve another problem that's created by another centralized entity, we're just repeating the cycle. We'll be repeating this circle, the circle of strife. So something's got to change, and so yeah, that's my my thinking, my process. So yeah.
I mean, the only thing what I wanted to ask is, and this is Paul, if you could share your opinion regarding central bank digital currencies. So this is where the governments, or rather the state, has full control over your spendings. What is your thoughts regarding CBDCs? Now, based on my understanding, whether we like it or not, CBDCs will become mainstream, maybe 3 to 5 years down the line, or maybe after that. How do we protect ourselves against that?
Yeah, look, it'll be no surprise to you to hear that I'm totally against them. And there are many cases that can be made from a financial point of view, from a kind of state point of view. But I think, and it's quite topical actually at the moment, given what's going on in the UK and around the world as well. We are really starting to get into the social realm of the consequences of the decisions that we've been making and the way we've been structuring our society over the past decades. Now, CBDCs in particular, I think, are the end state of the system, which I believe is a major use case for cryptocurrency, and that is, as you mentioned earlier, George, was the separation of money and state. And I think blockchain is as significant as the separation of church and state. And in the CBDC case, I think is potentially the end of all economic and possibly human activity. When you have someone gatekeeping down to the granularity of what a CBDC will be capable of gatekeeping, then I don't see how humanity can flourish in that environment. It is the ultimate end state of the asymmetry of power. And actually, this country in particular, Australia, has an interesting history when it comes to identity, and I share some of that history in the book. But you may not be aware, but in the 1980s, there was an initiative started called the Australia Card, which it was back then it was going to be just a plastic card, but uniquely it was going to be a centralized system. It was a brand new system that was proposed that would amalgamate and centralize records from the Taxation Office, from the Department of Veteran Affairs, from various state land registries. It would hoover up all of this information into a centralized repository. Now, at the time in the 80s, it rallied this country in a way that I just haven't seen before. So this issue about the state hoovering up our identity cut through all social divides. There were authors, sportsmen, politicians, musicians, just a wide array of people came together on this issue and decided not on our watch. And I think it's because they understood that what was actually being proposed was a fundamental restructuring of the nature of trust within society. And I've actually got a quote here that's relevant from that time. There was a joint select committee that was formed to evaluate this proposal, which was overwhelmingly rejected. Actually, it went to a general election, that particular issue. And this quote's from the Reverend Michael Challen, who was the Bishop of the Anglican Diocese of Perth in Western Australia and chairman of its Social Responsibilities Commission. And he made an astute point on the nature of trust and how trust is impacted when the state gets its mitts on our identities. He said, at the moment, our society, by and large, operates on the basis of trust. Now and then, people are asked to identify themselves. He said, it's the Commission's expectation that once a universal identity system is established, that order will be reversed. And I think that's the nature of what we're facing now. We are risking upending the fundamentals of trust in our society.
Yeah, absolutely spot on. I think, let's see if we have some kind of revolution, against central bank digital currency. Now, we know regarding politicians, they are divided. One side of the politics, they want CBDCs, the other side of it, they don't want CBDCs. And now, what are your thoughts about, I'm not sure if you've heard of this protocol called as Panther Protocol. So essentially what that is, your transactions, so far as cryptocurrency is concerned, is 100% private. But there is an option in case if you want to show to the government that you've gone ahead and done this transaction, you can go ahead and do that. And this, if I'm not mistaken, it goes beyond financial products as well, let's say smart contracts. What is your thoughts on that? And I think Zcash does something similar to that. I'm not sure if you've heard of a project called Zcash, where you're 100% in control of your data, but if needed, you can go ahead and verify that this is you who has done this transaction.
Yeah. So again, I tend to view these things with quite binary thinking until the justification to do otherwise emerges. So my initial response to that is love the first half of what you said, totally private, and then if, and that's a big if, because we can delve into the definition of you choosing to actually relinquish this information to the government. Well, like I said before, if the system is capable of doing that, then my confidence level that the behavior of that system will respect in its entirety what my desires are is pretty low, to be honest. And I would wager that there would be plenty of ways that you can prove transactions that have happened via any mechanism to the state, should you be quirky enough to want to do that. So I just, it has a smell of, and I admit I don't have detailed knowledge here, but as an overarching comment, it just has the smell of a backdoor in it. And there have been certainly attempts in this country to do things akin to what I'm describing here. For example, backdoors into SSL encryption, which was actually proposed here. And I mean, as far as I'm concerned, then you can throw the whole encryption in the bin if there's some mechanism by which a predatory entity can be offered access to that sort of data. And we're again in the legislative space here in this country in the middle of May this year. Actually, federal legislation was passed to introduce a national digital ID system. There were some various tricks that were used to get that through the Parliament system. And Section 71, if memory serves, of that legislation says quite clearly that the use of this system is entirely optional. But in the, what is it, it only took, the ink wasn't even dry on that before we started to see evidence that wasn't the case. There were various players, particularly government organizations, state government organizations, private businesses, even down to job listings on job boards. We're now saying, we're mandating that you, or require that you obtain one of these so-called voluntary national digital IDs. So again, so the legislation was no protection because people end up doing what they do anyway. So that's my take on it. I think if a system is capable of failing in a particular way, then we have to treat it as insecure.
I 100% agree, and I'm really liking the fact that we need to be skeptical. I'm just hoping that everyone is skeptical when it comes to when people say certain things. Don't trust, verify. That should definitely be a motto. I mean, do you have any questions, Markose? Because I do want to read something which I love when I listened to Paul's episode with. I think it was called as the Fearless Project. I think
Fearless
maybe
Prophet,
that wasn't that.
yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any questions, Markose? Or?
No, don't have any questions. I guess just comments, I guess. And we were talking about privacy, and we did mention like Panther Protocol. That's with Dr. Anish Muhammad, and you got Zcash, Zuko. They have their shielded transactions, but the problem I see with Zcash, technology-wise, I do believe it is better than Monero. I guess that they use more exotic how do you say, ZKP as compared to Monero, which is more like bulletproof. So it is peer reviewed. That definitely is battle tested. And I guess the problem is that only one. I could be wrong. Well, maybe 1% of the Zcash is shielded, which means that it could still be. It can be tracked and traced in a sense. So compared to Monero, which is Monero or Xano or many of the privacy coins, which are privacy by default. So, but so Monero has their own, open key mechanisms similar to Zcash or Panther Protocol. They have selective disclosures, so instead of, entities, prying into your transactions, they need your permission. So basically, it changes the social dynamics, which I prefer too. So which makes I personally it does make a lot of sense, but unfortunately, in the current paradigm we are in, our world is kind of inverse. It's upside down. So the government entities are private, while the public, while the regular Joes and Janes, they are public. They're exposed. So they're exposed to financial voyeurism. So which is not good. So that's the comments I want to share. But I guess in terms of questions, I think George, you covered it quite well. So I think in this would be good.
The only thing I can say is, Paul did have a brilliant episode. We'll definitely put it in the show notes so listeners can check it out. Where the host actually defined what the government actually is defined as, and it actually says it's governing the mental state of the people. And the way she put it across was absolutely beautiful. So listeners will definitely check it out.
Well, before we move to the next, I just want to add a comment, because I'm glad she talked about, especially the word government, because just for folks, in terms of my libertarian philosophy, I guess I tend to be more of the anarchist philosophy. So, but there's a reason why I get normally people look at the I forgot, but like the study of languages, how particular words, you can trace it to a particular meaning. So, for example, the word government. If you split the word government into two words, govern and ment, and ment comes from the Greek word mente, which means mind, and the Latin word for government or govern is control. So, what do you get? Mind control. So, but if you look at the word anarchy, it comes from the Greek word archon. So, archon is what? Ruler. And anthe is without rulers. So I know a lot of people, and in the libertarian circles, we have these arguments. We are not against rules, but against rulers. When you look at government, we see it as mind control. So it is really interesting to see the history of these words, and how it goes back to Latin and Greek and the meaning. So there is power in the word. There's power in those meanings, and not many people are aware of it. So just want to share that.
Yeah, that's a great point, Markose. Jeff Berwick likes to make that case as well. It's
Jeff Berwick,
hidden in plain sight, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, the next thing that we have on our agenda, just a couple of recap, regarding the cryptocurrency, blockchain, and AI world. I mean, since there are two anomalies which I've seen at least since the last 6 weeks. One is quite a lot of hacks and exploits in the cryptocurrency and blockchain space. The second one is a lot of AI-related news from Abu Dhabi. So, for listeners in UAE, there is an UAE AI camp, the Mohammed bin Zayed University of Artificial Intelligence. They have a 6-day executive AI program plan as well. So I think it is a paid one. Then Cleveland Clinic in Abu Dhabi, they have become the UAE's largest center for AI-assisted colonoscopy procedures. Now this, Markose and Paul, is an absolute game changer so far as AI is concerned, because with using artificial intelligence, they can actually identify cancer at a very, very early stage, and you're literally talking about a decade before. So it can literally save lives. So the time span that they actually reduce is almost 10 years. So that is an absolute game changer. Then from Abu Dhabi, we have Blockchain Center in Abu Dhabi, which is opened up. So and that I'm sure a lot of international people will be wanting to get into that. And there is AI for recruitment. I haven't heard any AI projects regarding recruitment. The project is called as Bearbell AI. And finally, there's another one called as AI Summer Program, Prompt Engineering Bootcamp. So if any of the listeners
that's a lot going on in the UAE. Wow.
especially in Abu Dhabi and the Emirate of Abu Dhabi. It looks like they
Yeah.
want to be the capital so far as artificial intelligence is concerned.
Yeah.
And the final thing that we have, Marcus, is Ripple. They have had a partnership with DIFC Innovation Hub, which is a bit strange because they want to go ahead and uh, uh, what is the right word I'm trying to look at? They want to go ahead and promote blockchain technology, but Ripple does not use blockchain technology. So I'm not sure, they are the massive advocates of blockchain technology. So hopefully in the next session that we do, I believe that might be on the 15th of this month, we'll go and discuss Ripple versus open blockchain. Is Ripple actually using a blockchain? And we'll answer this basic question: can Ripple actually work without XRP? And the answer to that is yes. See, we don't need XRP, and Ripple is essentially a software. So that is essentially what we'll cover on the episode on the 15th of August, isn't it?
Yeah. Definitely going to do that. Yeah. I actually, I'm kind of looking forward to have that conversation on Ripple and its token XRP. It is fascinating. Because I remember like what 2016, 2015. I remember like there was a time like Monero was in the top 10, but there was this conversation about Ripple, and I remember that time there was a lot of unity in Bitcoin in those days, or the everyone was super against XRP, or I mean Ripple. It was like a banker's token or coin or something. So I don't know, just kind of like reminiscing those days, I guess. Quite interesting to see. But definitely, I think George, we definitely need to have a conversation about: is it really a blockchain, or is it really software, or are there degrees in decentralization or blockchain? Or so I don't know. So they definitely want to scatter the smoke and mirrors and stuff and get right into the heart of things. So yeah, that's my talk, I
Regarding
guess.
Ripple, one thing which I wanted to say, which is indirectly connected to privacy, is that El Salvador, rather than making Bitcoin a legal tender, they could have actually implemented a Ripple that would have actually saved people a lot of money so far as transfer is concerned. Because what El Salvador has done is they have used Bitcoin, but that is done using Chivo wallet, and you need to go ahead and do your KYC. Now, regarding privacy, Paul, roughly around 4 months ago, the opposition party did actually go ahead and leak, I believe it was 300,000 users, private information who used Chivo wallet. So President Nayib Bukele was not at all happy about it. And that was more of a political stunt as to why they went in and released that information. I'm not sure if it was 300,000 or more than that, but that is why privacy is so critical, isn't it? But yeah, I think
But
that's
there you
about all
have the blending of. Sorry, George.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, there you have the blending of the two worlds.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
In a perfect example. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we've covered pretty much everything, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm glad we got to have this conversation about, the role of governments and, central entities. And I'm glad we got to have these conversations on the importance of privacy, and especially not just digital identity, but also data in general. Because I know, Paul, I know we also talked about, with the AI and the horizon, and now, look, in a couple of years, I'm sure right now I'll be using like at least minimum like 5 AI apps for my research, for my writing. Hopefully we have an AI to help set up all my podcast stuff, make my life easy, AI. So and also storing data securely too. That's also another thing. I don't want to depend on Google Cloud or AWS and stuff. I would prefer some sort of sharding mechanisms to scatter my data all over the place. At least I know there's still, I guess, in the corporate level, there's still this confusion about decentralized storage. Because I remember I talked to some folks who work for, I would say, some tech companies, which is funny. But they're not like a techie person, but I think they're more like either administration or business development, but still, they were not sure about decentralized storage, where it is stored, yada yada yada. There has to be geo locked or something like that, which still, like, I mean, I guess on a regulation side it's fine, but from a security side, it still doesn't increase the security. So these conversations, um, I don't know, it still has to be. I guess for people like us, we still have to teach people, bring that awareness, and you know, and to come to the point where Paul is really talking about the importance of digital data and identity itself is an important aspect of human data. So that's going to play a major role in decentralized storage, definitely AI, and I guess many other industries too. So yeah.
I just have
But
one
yeah.
question to Paul. Do you play the guitar by any chance, Paul?
Oh, you saw my Les Paul behind me. Whenever
that's
I get the
wicked.
chance, which isn't much
Because
at the moment.
I play drums as well, but mine is more of an extreme genre, death metal. I'm not sure if you listen to death metal.
Okay, right, yeah. I used to play it much more. Being on the journey of writing a book, you find there's actually very little that you can do in parallel, including reading other books. I used to enjoy reading a lot, but just haven't had the space and time for it. So,
but yeah, if you ever visit Dubai, we should definitely do a jam session for sure.
That sounds like a date. That's excellent.
Nice, yeah. I think we are pretty much done, right, Markose?
Yeah, no, I tell you what, but Paul, please talk about your book. Give a little intro, and hey, how can people get your book, and also how can people reach out to you to learn more?
Yeah, sure. So the quick pitch, it's a non-fiction. It's called Citizen One: The Case Against Digital Identity. It's not a textbook. It's a very human story. I bring my family story into it, and yeah, as I've mentioned, it's my contribution to the knowledge base regarding what I think is the biggest social and technical threat that we're facing at the moment. And as I mentioned, my family history in Nazi Germany allows me to bring some rather personal observations and tales to the story of what we now face, and that is the issue of digital hygiene. And I make the case that a chain is only as strong as its weakest link when it comes to privacy. And certainly what we're seeing unfold now is that governments are becoming more opaque to us, whereas we're becoming more transparent to governments. And the pages of history are quite clear on that. That generally doesn't end well. So the latest update is I should be getting the final edit back from the publisher tomorrow, and then it's a layout, and the printing has all been paid for and should be ready to go.
Wow.
So we're getting pretty close now, but unfortunately I don't have an official date to share, but I recommend if people are interested, just head to my website, either citizenonebook.com or paulgconlon.com, and you can sign up to my mailing list there or follow me on socials, and I'll let everyone know when it's ready to go.
No, thank you so much for sharing your body of work. I'm glad that because I know it's a labor of love, just condensing all that information, also bringing but like George, when you get a chance to check his book, I mean, I think for me, Paul, like, you brought like history into reality, and like and also like trying to see from the eyes of your grandma and your granddad, and I remember like after the fall of Nazi Germany, and then the what do you call the restructuring of Germany at that time, so it was kind of interesting to see like how your grandma, your granddad met. I kind of enjoyed that, and to me, it was such a. I was just curious, like, what was it like to live at that time, the transition, and what they got to experience, especially even before, like even with the, the mental struggles to go through that times. that's super fascinating for me. So I know I just wanted to highlight that and get people to see that. So
yeah, thank you, Markose. And
I
and
felt
like
that, yeah.
everything with history, when we look back at history, we usually do so from the comfort of our lounge chair, and it is different to think about what that experience would have been, because unlike a history book where you know exactly when, the dates of when things changed and that it would all work out, when you're actually living through those times, and certainly in that area of history, just about everything about the world had changed, and no one really knew what was ahead. It was a period of uncertainty. There was a period of continued difficulty and prejudice on both sides. And yeah, I think we should not forget these hard-earned lessons, and remember that when people experienced these things in the past, it was very much real for them. There were no this is the end chapter for them, and I think we should continue forward now in our experiences in a similar way, knowing let's keep the eye on where we want to go and where we don't want to go. So yeah, looking forward to sharing it with the world.
Awesome. Thank you, Paul. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your service. Yeah.
Thank you, John.
But but Emmett, that being said, before we end, hey, George, please do share to our fam. Where can they check out the podcast, and how can they reach out to you?
Go to Spotify, Apple iTunes, pretty much go to any website. I'm kind of like reading off from my script, I feel like. But yeah, go to any podcasting platform, just type in Blockchain TXP and you'll see my episodes. I think over 540 episodes in the cryptocurrency blockchain space. And I do have another podcast, fitness related, which is more to do with obstacle course race, Spartan race, Tough Mudder. So it's called as the Race Based Podcast. So please feel free to go and check that thing out as well. But cheers so much. Thank you so very much, guys, for doing this. Appreciate it.
All right, fam. There we have it. So we got to go, fam. So y'all be good. Y'all be safe. We'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.